any white race or a white nation of people that has went through this type of atrocity? Name one. Heck, even name them fake Jews. Name them. Name them fake Jews. What issues they went over? The Holocaust.
Jews in general, or the Jewish man, we look at him as the impostor. He's not the original Jewish man.
We finna get into this really quick. I've been brushing up against this a lot. A lot of people say the 1948ers are imposters. That's what they call them, the 1948ers. People that made Aliyah or migrated from, different parts during the Hitler persecution, during the Holocaust. Yeah, man. And I always just kind of squint my eyes, tilt my head sideways, and I try to just brush it off like, hey, that's a very nuanced topic, Me personally, my personal opinion, I think being Jew is a theological concept. I'm not going to get into that right now, but if somebody claims to be descendants of Israel or of Jewish descent or Jew, I don't care. I promise you, I do not care at all. But the moment somebody starts saying the people in Israel are not Jewish, that's when, honestly, I still don't care that somebody would think that or say that, but that's when I just like, do people actually like, where does that come from, And we're going to get into why. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to start off in the Torah. This is Exodus chapter 12, verse 38. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, every or even very much cattle. All right, so this is during the Exodus. And here, it's clear as day. Vegam erev rav. Ve and gam also erev mixed rav. Many, great. A mixed multitude, meaning non-Israelites. So there's that. From the very foundation of the Israelites forming as a nation, they were a mixed multitude. Okay. This is Esther chapter 8. Now, remember, this is during the Persian Empire. This is after Mordecai. They got Haman. He was hung on the gallop. They got victory, and it was really cool. Everybody was, happily ever after type story. Verse 17, chapter 8, verse 17. And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had gladness and joy, a feast and a good day. And many from among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews was fallen up on them. Now, this is part of the reason I say I believe that being a Jew is a theological concept, because you just can't switch ethnicity. So, but I'm not going to get into that. And many from among the peoples of the land became Jews. This is a mass conversion. All right. And now, mind you, this is in the 400s BCE, before Yehoshua, Christ, walked this earth. And then there's another mass conversion. It's not in the Bible, but it's during the Maccabean period. You got Hyrcanus took also Dora and Marissa, cities of Iduma. I know it's real small on the screen, but bear with me. And he subdued all the Idumeans. These are the Edomites, and permitted them to stay in that country if they would circumcise their genitals and make use of the laws of the Jews. This is another mass conversion. All right. And this is actually, this works its way into who Herod is. When you open the book of Matthew and you see stuff about Herod, this is bloodline. He was, anyways, I'm not going to get sidetracked because we got a lot to cover. All right. So here you have the 70 AD temple destruction. Now, a lot of times when I hear people explain this, people that claim that the Israelites in Israel are not Israelites, but they're imposters, they go from the 70 AD temple destruction to Judeans went to Africa, and they were in the diaspora in Africa, and then they got caught up in the transatlantic slave trade. I'm not trying to do a straw man. That's just how I've heard it explained to me multiple times. And I get that process, but there's just There, it gives me questions. Let me just say it like that. It gives me questions. Not the fact that Judeans went to Africa. I know that for a fact to be true, but there's a lot of gap in history. So again, if Judeans went to Africa and if some Judeans got caught up on the transatlantic slave trade, 100%, you could be a Jew to whoever makes that claim. However, my confusion comes in when people start saying that the people in Israel, since they came from Poland and these different areas, are not Jews. And this is going to explain why. Now, I don't want to spend so much time taking so many rabbit trails. This study is around a 24-hour study. And I don't mean 24-hour as in like, hey, it took me a day to put this stuff together. I mean 24 hours as in like clock time, meaning, 2 hours here, 1 hour there, 3 hours there, studies like that. But it's definitely it's complex. That's all I'm going to say. But I'm going to give the very simplified version. I might highlight a few things if I feel need to. So 70 AD temple destruction. Then you had Judeans that went into captivity. Now, all the Jews did not live in Judea. I want to make that clear now. But so this captivity only affected Judeans. And something very interesting about this captivity that affected only Judeans is not all Jews went into exile. Check this out. Rome destroyed the capital and temple, not every village and hill town. Romans needed Jews to remain for tax revenue, farming, and maintaining infrastructure. It literally would not benefit the Romans if they left the land without population. So they allowed Judeans to stay in the land. But if you were a captive, then you would go to a processing center. Captives were sorted by age, gender, physical condition, perceived threat, economic usefulness. Based on this classification, they would either be enslaved, deported, or executed. The type of people executed would be rebel leaders, fighters, suspected organizers, anybody that's sus, or anyone that's seen as a threat. If people that would be deported would be elders, intellectuals, priestly elites, non-combatants, or people that were unprofitable as slaves. And this is actually interesting. I mean, because this was done strategically because they didn't want, they wanted to break leadership networks, and they didn't want anybody of any influence to be martyred. So it was done with strategy. And if you were enslaved, more than likely you were a young adult, skilled in laboring and physically strong. But here's my thing: that's if you were a captive in Judea. Okay, if you were a captive in Judea, you would be classified. And then this gets into the captive processing because we have all these facts. We have all these sources that tell us, it spells it out for us. But you go to, depending on your classification, you can go to Samaria, Caesarea, or Baishin. So if you were going to Caesarea, the main export was one that like you were getting on a boat pretty much. So if you were a captive, you got processed, you're going to Caesarea, you already know you finna go by boat. Go by boat to where? Italy and Egypt. You going back to Egypt in the slave trade. All right. And I wonder if this is gonna pop up. Boom. So we have even the slave routes, first, third century CE. So you got Caesarea here, shooting people to Alexandria, and then you take the main what you call it to Rome. So you go to Caesarea. Guess where you going? By boat to Egypt, or you going to Rome? This is like, and for the Romans, this was clockwork. They had all these routes mapped out. We'll get back to that maybe later. All right, so Judean captives, and we kind of broke that down. And it's important to break this down. It's important for you to know that all Jews were not exiled from Judea. It's important for you to know these different classifications to see where, Jews went in the diaspora, whether they went enslaved or, just went to different areas. Why? Because if you didn't know that, then you'd be kind of confused because you got the Kaitos War. This war was named after a Roman, I don't know his rank, um, Lucius Kaitus, but he's the one that actually ended the war. But there was a diaspora-wide uprising, and notably, Judea was involved. So if you think there's no Jews in Judea, here we are, 70 AD, temple destruction, and then 30, 45 years later, Judea is in the midst again. Okay. So, and it's really cool to me because, just as a side note, can you believe being a Jew in Judea? Let's say you like 10 years old, 5 years old, and you see this Roman thing pop off and the temple gets destroyed, and then you see this war pop off. That's crazy. A few years later, this war popping off. But anyways, keeping it moving down the timeline. A little bit later, you got the Bar Kokhba revolt, 132. It's about 15, 16, 17 years goes by. You got the Bar Kokhba revolt. Now this popped off because there was I forget the guy's name, but he was fixing to build a pagan place of worship in Jerusalem. Oh, it says it here. I got it here. Hadrian was fixing to build a pagan place of worship in Jerusalem. So you got this guy. I don't think anybody knows his real name, but we're just gonna call him Bar Kokhba. He, named himself a Messiah. And by the way, somebody else named themselves a Messiah here as well. I think his name was Andreas. But over here, you got this guy named himself a Messiah. He was actually validated by a notable rabbi, and everybody believed him. So everybody went to war with him, talking about all the Jews, because he was trying to defend Jerusalem, keeping this stuff from happening. And the outcome of that was widespread enslavement. Again, Jews this time were actually banned from Jerusalem. Jewish life shifts to Galilee in the diaspora. Judea renamed as Syria Palestinia, and there was catastrophic life loss. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed in this. So I'm going to read this real quick. It says Rome did not remove everyone in one sweep, in reference to the Bar Kokhba revolt. They did not have the manpower to do that. So high risk groups executed, enslaved, or deported, right back to the classification thing. Lower risk groups were not worth the cost of removal. Farmers in non-rebellious zones, elders, the sick, communities that surrendered early. So the remaining Jews in Judea, they were relocated mostly to Babylon and Galilee. So continuing on the time, and I forgot to like show y'all, just so y'all know, because I've watched a lot of these videos where people just state facts with authority. The guys like YouTube channels like Truth Unedited, and you just believe them, and they just be saying stuff loud and proud. You know what I'm saying? One thing they almost never do is go to source documents. So everything that I'm talking about, something points to something, and it goes to source documents. So the source documents on classification, you got the source documents on the Jewish population past 70 AD in Judea, whether it's Josephus, a third-party source, or the Mishnah, whatever the case may be. Everything goes to source documents. I'm not just talking out the side of my neck. This is confirmed history. Okay, so anyways, you got the Bar Kokhba revolt. We already went over that. This is 132 AD. Now, shortly after that, you got the redaction of the Mishnah, and these two centers are the places for development. So the reason this line's going this way is because we just learned during the Bar Kokhba revolt, they didn't exile everybody. The remaining Jews in Judea went to Babylon and Babylonia, and Galilee. And the reason they went to Babylon, I keep wanting to say Babylonia, scholars like to distinguish Babylonia from Babylon, even though it's the same location, but because it's different eras. But anyways, because in the Babylon exile, there was a lot of Jews that never came out of Babylon. So they were established. There was Jewish communities that were thriving in Babylon. So that was a stronghold, if you will, for the Jewish people. It was almost like a safe place. Well, safe as could be anyway. And then Galilee, we all know about Galilee. Okay. So this happens in 200 CE. And then you got the Talmud, the Yerushalmi, and then the Babylonian Talmud. And the main places for this is Galilee and Babylon, these two centers where many Jews were going. Now you have two noteworthy persecutions. Persecutions meaning Jews were persecuted for being Jewish. The Byzantine persecution, the Sasanian persecution. This took place from 5th to 7th century. Now, the Byzantine persecution is Christian persecution, where Christians were persecuting Jews for being Jewish. And same thing over here in Babylon. Now, this goes up, and I'm not going to get into all this, but it gives details and source documents of the persecution. And then it gives you I put all these different details in there. It's just to help me if I ever want to refer back to this. But you got the Persian Empire, which is the Sasanian persecution that we just discussed. And then you got the Byzantine Empire, which is the Byzantine or tomato persecution that we also just discussed. So this lets you know where their empires stretch to. So we over here, there's Italy, Rome, North Africa, and then over here in the Persian Empire, you see all of that. So going back down, I'm not going to get into this and the reasons they were persecuted. And no, we're just going to keep moving on the timeline. But there's a lot of details there. So then you got the Islamic conquest, where you got Umar ibn al-Khattab enters Jerusalem. This is in 638 CE. And this is actually cool because he allows Jews to go back to Jerusalem. And it ends the Byzantine era. So I need you to understand this. Him allowing Jews to go back to Jerusalem, there was a lot of Jews making aliyah from North Africa, from Asia Minor, from a lot of different places. Things were getting better for the Jews. And then in Babylon continued being Babylon. When the Byzantine Empire fell and old buddy came through, you had the Islamic conquest, then they allowed, I forget what they call it, but based on their Quran, they allowed the people of the book to do their thing, not freely. Of course, they had taxes and stuff like that, but it was a lot better than their previous oppressors. And then you got the Geonic period, 650 to 1050. Now, this is where the Babylonia universities, if you will, began to thrive. All right. And then the Mongols came and captured it. And this is where the Babylonia universities, like that ecosystem of the Jewish structure, it collapsed. And from there, the population began to shift to Spain and to North Africa. Okay. And then you had the Christian reconquest in Spain. That's where Jews were persecuted for being Jewish. You had forced conversions, expulsions from Spain, and everything's like tracked, bro. They went to North Africa. They went back to the Ottoman Empire. They went to Italy, Venice. They went all over the place. They were scattered. And by the way, shortly after, the transatlantic slave trade started. But there's one thing we got to make note of, okay? These same Jews that were persecuted in Spain because they were Jewish are the same Jews that were persecuted in Babylon because they were Jewish. And these same Jewish people that were persecuted in Babylon because they were Jewish are the same Jews that had their communities established in Babylon. And those same Jews that had their communities established in Babylon were the same Jews that were allowed to thrive in Babylon based on the Islamic conquest. And the same Jews that were allowed to thrive in Babylon because the Islamic conquest, and those same Jews that were allowed to go to Jerusalem again because of that Islamic conquest, were the same Jews that were persecuted during the Byzantine and Sasanian persecutions. And these same Jews that were persecuted during the Byzantine and Sasanian persecutions were the same Jews that drafted the Talmud. And these same Jews that drafted the Talmud in Jerusalem and in Babylon are the same Jews that redacted the Mishnah in Galilee and in Babylonia. And these same Jews that redacted the Mishnah in Galilee and Babylonia are the same Jews that were part of the Bar Kokhba revolt. I mean, not the same ones, but you know their ancestors. And these same Jews that were part of the Bar Kokhba revolt are the same Jews that were part of the Kaitos War. And these same Jews that were part of the Kaitos War are the same Jews that are relevant to the 70 AD temple destruction.
Even ain't them fake Jews. Name them.
So there is a trail, and this is not all inclusive. This is some highlight moments, but there is a trail going all the way up into the Ottoman Empire. Now we're talking about 16th century. And it's been 20 minutes. I'm fixing to have to get off here. But by now, you got Jews in Poland, you got Germanic, you got Jews in Germany, you got Jews everywhere. They went north, they went south, they went east, they went west, everywhere. When the Ottoman decline took place, and they went everywhere due to trades already, like there was trade routes and stuff like that. I mean, it's an interesting study when you see how people groups migrate for certain reasons, to get away from persecution or to make more money or to for economic advantage and stuff like that. And them taking pre-existing trade routes to establish communities along those trade routes. But either way, then you had the Ottoman decline in the 18th, 19th century. That's when there was more persecution for Jews. And then, in the 19th century, 20th century, you had Hitler and his regime. And then 1948, they were reestablished. I mean, this study's not done. I'm not done with this study, obviously. But I just wanted to drop this video real quick because it's not that I keep seeing stuff online. I've been seeing stuff online about this topic for years. It's just the fact that I keep talking to people that make such prideful, outlandish claims. And I mean, it's definitely, I'll tell you what, my new phrase for 2026 is according to what? That's what, when people start claiming stuff, I'm just gonna say according to what? Some guy you watched on YouTube. Like, are you really, like, where's your source documents? Torare ba, that's all I got. Y'all right with your boy.
Jews in general, or the Jewish man, we look at him as the impostor. He's not the original Jewish man.
Adonai.